A lot to cover. I'm happy to stay afterwards and talk to anybody who wants to talk. I don't want to hold anybody prisoner here, so we're going to get right into it. So, we're talking tonight about tefillah, and I have to say, I go to many places and talk about different topics. Usually when I talk about tefillah, there are certain things I don't ask at the get-go because the guys aren't ready for it. I know from being here in the past that you guys are ready for it. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is how many of you, and be honest, have ever asked yourself, why does tefillah work? Yeah, you got to. I mean, if it wasn't half the guys, I'd be surprised. I understand the people that don't ask. We're Bali Emunah, we do this. I get it. But the understanding of having some hakara of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is understanding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is perfect. The idea that we could change his mind is borderline apikoursis. How do you change the mind of a perfect being whose judgment was perfect to begin with? And we know this is all through things. You know, tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, mavir, and Yisrael hagzera. This is core to who we are. We understand and we believe that we can do things with our tefillahs. How does that work, though? Does that mean Hashem was mistaken, chas v'shalom? Yeah. Well, how does that work? Which cheshbon was right? So I'm taking you down a little bit of an express journey. And I hope by the time we get about halfway through, I'm going to tell you that your life is about to change. I'm not exaggerating. First, understand one core thing which you must understand. The pasuk says in Bamidbar by the Meraglim, Ish echad, Ish echad. Moshe was mitzvah to send one person from every shevet. Says all the Mefarshim, why the double lashon? Whenever we have a double lashon in the Torah, Ish echad, it's always telling us something. So one of the Mefarshim, many of them actually, say that Moshe Rabbeinu's cheshbon was lav dafka, he was going to send 12. There was no tziva that he had to send one from every shevet, and he wasn't going to. Moshe Rabbeinu suspected that there might be a problem with the Meraglim, so he says, let's try to stack the deck. We're going to jury-rig the Meraglim. Let's look back at the history of the Shvatim, see which shevet might be nichshol. He says, first you have Shevet Yehuda that lied to Yaakov Avinu, and he said, you know, well, it looks like Yosef was killed by a wild animal. So you see, under certain circumstances, someone from Shevet Yehuda might be able to utter a non-truth. Secondly, the whole thing started with Yosef telling Lashon Hara and his brothers. So you see, under certain circumstances, maybe someone from Shevet Yosef might be Motzei Laz on Eretz Yisrael. That was Moshe Rabbeinu's cheshbon. These two Shvatim had been, to some extent, on their level, nichshel in the past. I'm only sending 10. Who would Moshe have held back? Kalev and Yoshua, from Shevet Yehuda and from Shevet Ephraim and Shevet Yosef. So Moshe Rabbeinu, with all of his nevuah and all of his das and all of his perfection, his cheshbon was 180 degrees different from what the cheshbon of Shemayim had to be. And Hashem told him, no, Moshe, with all of your greatness, your cheshbon is 100% wrong. So that's the first principle you must get. We don't have a clue what's going on. We think we know, we think we want, we don't know. Second, beginning a couple weeks parsha from now, we're going to have to do Parshas Toldos. Strange lashon. The pasuk's talking about Yitzchak and Rivka being mispalel for a child, and it says Vayetar Yitzchak. Vayetar is this unusual lashon of tefillah according to Rashi. And remember, Hebrew is not like English or any other language. In English, we have 20 words that say big, gigantic, enormous. We have 100 words that say big. We don't have that in Hebrew. Hebrew is not a language of duplicative words. We only have one word that means love and like. We don't make distinctions between words like that. A word means many things. I mean, it's a broad category. But for some reason, in tefillah, we have a couple of different lashonos. We have Hispalel, which is the classic. We also have Vayitzaku, someone cries out, is sometimes a lashon of tefillah, but it's means a different thing. But nevertheless, we have this expression, Vayetar Yitzchak, and Rashi is all over it. Rashi says, Vayetar, the reason they're using this lashon of tefillah is because they weren't simply davening for a child, but rather, no one in the history of the world had ever davened with such intensity and such perseverance, without letting up, relentlessness, pounding on the gates of Shemayim. That's what Rashi describes the tefillah of Yitzchak and Rivka. The obvious question though is why? Why did Yitzchak, who was perhaps the most chashuv of the avos, he was a carbon. He wasn't even allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. He was so chashuv. Why did he have to pound the gates of Shemayim to have a child? The Gemara offers a couple possibilities. None of them are really great for the situation. The Gemara says Kadosh Baruch Hu made all the others wait for children because he wanted to hear their tefillas, because the tefillas of tzaddikim are precious to him. Possible reason number two, the Gemara offers, is that if you have to wait for something, perhaps it's more chavod for you, and he wanted the others to really treasure their children. That's a reason perhaps offered by the Gemara. The problem is it doesn't explain why Yitzchak more than Abraham, why Yitzchak more than Yaakov. It doesn't explain that. It just doesn't seem why he should have to pound the gates of Shemayim. And I have to tell you, this question bothered me for a number of years. And here's where your life is going to change. Starting, it's going to take me a few minutes to get there. I learned a medrash a few years ago that sheds some light on this problem. It describes the scene in Shemayim when Yitzchak is pounding on the gates, begging for a child. And the medrash explains that Malachim immediately rushed to the Kisei Shel Kavod and said, Hashem, it's Yitzchak Avinu, you have to accept his tefillas. And before anything could happen, other Malachim immediately rushed and said, no, you can't accept his tefillas. Why not? Because Hashem, remember, you've already been gozer, that you're not going to allow Avram to live out his full life because you don't want him to see his grandson Esav become a Rasha the day he commits the 3 cardinal averas at one moment. So you're going to take him 5 years early. You all know of us were all supposed to live to be 180 years old. Avram died 5 years early, says the Mefarshim, so he wouldn't see Esav commit the 3 cardinal averas. So these malachim were telling Kadosh Baruch Hu, no, you can't accept Yitzchak's tefillas earlier even, because then you're going to have to take Avram even early. Understand the ramifications of what we're talking about. The Medrash explains the tug of war until finally Kadosh Baruch Hu relented. He couldn't resist Yitzchak's tefillas anymore, and Esav and Yaakov were born. Yitzchak has no idea that what he's davening for is his father's death. Because the moment he has Esav, the clock is ticking on his father's life. Esav has no idea about this. He wants a child. He doesn't know there's a connection between his child being born and Avram dying. He has no idea. But understand the ramifications of this medrash. The medrash is telling you that your tefillas have no less koach than life and death itself. When people are born, when people die. So the next time you're running in for Shacharis and you're a little groggy, slap yourself and realize what a possibility you have in your hands. What ability you have, every person, to literally change the world and the derech of the world. It's powerful. It's powerful. Nevertheless, we're left with our original question. How does it work? How does it work? And I got to tell you, back in Baltimore, I only get to learn a few hours a day now. And I go to Mincha in the middle of the day. I have a minyan right by my office. And 6 months ago already, people are starting to say, do we really need to add Kapitel Tehillim at the end of davening now? I mean, it's been going on for a year and a half. I thought it was such a bizayon. Such a bizayon. First of all, it shows a lack of hakara for the koach of tefillah. And number two, what are you getting back to that's more important? And just on that side, I'll tell you something else. This will probably ring true with all you guys. You may notice that often, not always, but often, the best learner in yeshiva or in high school is often also the best ball player. Not always, but often. This is something we see all through history. People that excel in multiple areas. Take the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim wrote the Mishnah Berurah. Probably in 500 years, no one had a compilation of halacha like the Mishnah Berurah the Chafetz Chaim had done in the late 1800s. 500 years to bring up to date all the halachas of the Shulchan Aruch and many other sources. What's the Chafetz Chaim best known for, though? He's best known for Shmir Salashim. Why? Because Shmir Salashim is unique. No one's ever put together a compilation like the Chafetz Chaim did about what you can say and what you can't say and what you should and what you shouldn't say. It's unique. So that's what he's most known for, even though no one would argue that the Mishnah Berurah is the greatest halacha compilation in the last 500 years. We have other people like that. The Torah. Many people know that the Torah is the Mechaber of the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim is pure genius. You can't sit there with a slide rule and figure out the things that the Baal HaTurim did. You have to look at a pasuk by Yom Hashem Moshe Lemar and say this is Gematria 682, which is the same Gematria. That's only if your mind works like that. It's a special gift. But the Baal HaTurim is also the Chaber of the Torah Shulchan Aruch, one of the great halachic compilations of the 12th century. You have just pure, completely different types of genius. One is mathematical and one is knowledge-based, completely different. But what's the Torah best known for? The Baal HaTurim. Even though he was a genius master in halacha like the Chafetz Chaim was. Because we had the Rambam and we had other sources of halacha. What he wrote in the Baal HaTurim is unique. Never before and never since had anyone compiled something like that. Same thing, David HaMelech. David HaMelech. I would say you could write books about David HaMelech, but we did write books about David HaMelech. We have books about him in the Navi. Secular history writes about David HaMelech. The most amazing life a person could have lived starts out as a simple shepherd, ends up becoming designated as the next Melech of Klal Yisrael, the first one from Shevet Yehuda, ends up marrying the Melech's daughter. Then the Melech finds out he's going to be the successor. The Melech puts a death decree on him. The Melech loses his Ruach HaKodesh. There's milchamas and there's fighting, and David HaMelech has to hide, literally like a beggar in caves, to survive. Then finally, he rises to build the greatest Malchus in the history of Klal Yisrael. When all the other nations were begging to trade with us, all the other nations are begging to make treaty with us. Malchus-based David was one of the golden times of Yiddishkeit. Until what happens? As David HaMelech grows old, his own children begin to fight over who's going to succeed him. Until finally one of his children, Avshalom, decides he's going to try to kill David HaMelech because he's not on his side. We have a Yad Avshalom sitting at the base of Har Zaysim, which is a monument Avshalom built to show how strong he was. He could conquer anything. But Avshalom wanted to kill David HaMelech. This was his life. In the last years, he had to worry about his son trying to kill him. Until finally, you all know how David HaMelech's life ended at only the age of 70, when he could never get warm, and he lived his life shivering, suffering. But you could write a book, many books, from the Shakespearean tragedy part until the glory of David HaMelech's conversations with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what's David HaMelech best known for? Sefer Tehillim. 2,000 years later, that's the book we all pull out when we need to daven. Because again, David HaMelech, like the Torah and like the Chafetz Chaim, was one of these extraordinary people who in a lifetime was brilliant in multiple areas. We still have them today. There are people like this today. But nevertheless, that's the Sefer that they pull out, the Sefer Tehillim. Why? How does it make a difference? How does our davening help? So I'm going to tell you a crazy idea. I never would have said such an idea on my own, but I learned it a few years ago in the Ramban. Not the whole idea, but the first part. The Ramban is troubled. I think it's in Vayakhel, it may be in Pekudi, I don't remember, maybe even Kisisa. I know it's the end of Sefer Shmos. There's a Ramban who's troubled by this idea that we just talked about. The fact that in Hebrew, we don't generally have more than one word that means the same thing. And the Ramban is troubled by Ani and Anochi. Two words that mean the same thing. So the Ramban says that they're really not two words that mean the same thing. Yes, it's true, Anochi is typically more often used by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Ani is more often typically used by people, but not always. And the Ramban says they both have the shorish in the word an. And forgive me, I'm going to say something a little bit Kabbalistic where, if you get the Art Scroll version of the Ramban, they edit this stuff out, but it's important to understand the chayfetz for tefillah we're talking about. The Ramban says that An and Anochi are really a shorish of the same word. What's the difference? He says one referring to people, one referring to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Again, Kabbalah 101. When Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he created a tzimtzum to shield himself from the world. 99.9% of him withdrew from the world. Because if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was here in all of his honor and glory, there'd be no room for anything else. There'd be no room for a world. So Hashem had to shield himself. But nevertheless, all the Sifrei Kabbalah say that there was a reshima left behind, an impression or a residue, depending on which sefer you're reading. But Kadosh Baruch Hu left a little portion of himself behind, the 0.001% that's here. For example, regarding Karka, that's in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael has a special kedusha. You may not be able to put your finger on it. Some of you feel different when you smell the air. Some of you feel different just walking in the streets of Eretz Yisrael. There's a different feeling here. There's a different hergish here. That's because of the Reshima. Says the Ramban that the Rishima of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's essence is in people. The Yidden in particular, the Jewish people. There's a piece of us in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever that means. We represent a small, tiny piece of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that can still exist in our world without it destroying everything around it from its overwhelming presence. Again, that's the Ramban. What I'm going to say now is my extension of that. If you understand what the Ramban's saying, and it's way out there, that we are in some way a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then this all makes sense. Because we're not some external force trying to change the mind of the Borei Olam. That makes no sense. Some little amoeba is trying to change the mind of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? No. According to this Ramban, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a midah of rachamim, and he has a midah of din, HaKadosh Baruch Hu also has the midah of humanity within him. So that when we are davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we are not an outside force. We're, for lack of a better word, lahavdil, inside his head. We have a say, just like the midah of din and the midah of rachamim have a say, of which midah is going to carry the day. It's a radical, radical idea, but it should forever change the way you approach davening. Not only the seriousness of the consequences of your tefillah, but of the unbelievable opportunity that it presents. Every time you open a siddur, you have this ability. For that matter, every time you open a Sefer Tehillim, you want to say a little extra Tehillim at night before you go to bed. It's not just a girl thing, really. It's okay. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity to open a Sefer Tehillim and say the same tefillahs that David HaMelech was saying 2,000 years ago. But understand the opportunity that it presents, not just the opportunity, but also the chiyuv that goes with it. It's like, I guess, it's like you go to an amusement park, but don't go on any of the rides. Why would you be there? Why would you have time set apart for tefillah and not use it for every possible thing you can get out of it? It's an amazing opportunity. We have to be careful not to squander it. Also, there's the old mushal that we know. Someone's driving to an important appointment, and he's worried he's got to go into Manhattan. He's not going to find a place to park. So he says, Hashem, please let me find a parking spot right in front. I'm late for the appointment. And then, well, look, there's a spot right in front. Never mind, Hashem, I found one. We can't, chas v'sholom, think for a moment that when all the tov is coming our way, when all the brachos are coming our way, we can't possibly think for a second, this wasn't A, the Yad Hashem, and it wasn't B, because we were davening for it. Every person here who took place in extra Tehillim after davening, you have a chelik in the hostages coming home. Every person. Every person. That it took 2 years, maybe it should have taken 5 years, maybe it could have taken 1 year if we davened a little bit better. But just understand the koach that you have in tefillah. There's nothing more powerful that you can do every single day, 3 times a day. I'll finish with one last story. My Rosh Hashiva, Weinberg in Area Yisrael of Baltimore, he was once talking to my Rebbe, and he said to him, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he said, so-and-so, how many times have you said Kriya Shema today? Once. I'll say it again, Kriya Shema Alamita. It's once. You're okay with only once being makir? The Ol Malchus Shemayim, that's enough for you? Get you through the day? I can't be masik such a thing. How can you get through the day saying Kriya Shema in Shacharis and Mariv and Alamita? How do you do that? How can it be 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you said Kriya Shema once? How do you do that? That's the madrega of someone who understands the power of tefillah. We can't all get there, at least not right away. But understand the gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, that we could make use of tefillah in such a way. It's a real schus to be here. I told the guys here last year, and I told Rosh Hashiva just recently, I learned with a lot of the guys that come back to Baltimore that are from this yeshiva and others. You guys are disproportionately making an impact. And where you guys are 2-3 years down the road from being here is ahead of your counterparts. Yes, there's great guys in other yeshivas too. There's good guys in every yeshiva. But disproportionately, the guys that come here are excelling. And I suspect it's because the Rebbeim and the Rosh Yeshivas here have some type of secret sauce that they allow you to take advantage of the opportunity you have while you're here. One of those, going along with Gemara and all the other things you're learning, is tefillah. I hope you take something out of that. I'll be here for a while if anybody has any questions. Before we break up, anybody have any questions they want to ask? Yes, sir. No, just checking. Anybody? Okay. Yashkoya. Thank you.